What's up, guys? Welcome back to this month's subscription box. We've got an exciting one in store. This one's called the Solar Flare. Should be a lot of fun. Danny, should we get into it?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's go. As we begin unboxing this month's subscription box, we did include quite a few things in this box. There's a few color pigments that I ended up not using at all that you can feel free to use yourself if you want to use a different glow or if you want to go for a different look. So just keep that in mind, as you do have quite a few things that not everything has to go into the ring this month. All right, our first color pigment is the Astro Dust Papaya. This is just a really nice, vibrant orange. It's really cool to work with because it holds that orange color so well. Sometimes they can get washed out depending on if you add a lot of glow powder, but this one stays really nice and vibrant. Okay, next up we have Scarlet, which is a really nice deep red, but you can also make it into a nice kind of light red, dark pink if you add a lot more glow powder to this one. So it's a cool one to work with as well because you do have that nice deep red, but you can also achieve a lighter red and a pink with this one. Our last color pigment is the Obsidian Black. Anytime we're going for a black color in a ring, this is pretty much our gold standard. This color pigment really just, it's weird to say, but it stays nice and black. So this is our go-to anytime we want a black color in a ring. Okay, so the two opals that we have in this ring are our Crimson Red and a Blood Orange. Crimson Red opal is one of my favorites to work with. It's a really brilliant red that's constantly shifting colors in the light. Next up, we have our Blood Orange, as I mentioned earlier, and this is just a ravishing orange color. As it catches the light, it'll shift between this really nice bright orange to a lighter orange. You can even catch splashes of a green in there. Depending on what opal you're using and what color pigment, some of them will change or become a little bit washed out or take on the color of the color pigment behind them in your ring. So the Crimson and the Blood Orange are cool to work with because they're such a strong color that they'll stay really true to what they are. This month's ring will be on a black ceramic ring blank. This honestly is my favorite ring blank. I know I've said that about a lot of things in this ring, but I love the black ceramic because it's so lightweight, but it's quite strong and scratch resistant at the same time. I think it looks really cool, especially with this space theme, to have the black band. So I think this one really adds to this ring. So the last thing we have in this month's box is the Neon Orange and the Neon Red glow powders. These glow powders are really cool because they have a nice vibrant glow at night, but they also stay true to their glow in their daytime color. So the orange glow has an orange day, the red glow has a red day, and they're fun to work with because they glow so well compared to like a standard orange and red glow powder, and they have that same daytime. So they're just a fun one to work with because it doesn't take any extra effort on your part. You don't have to mix it, you don't have to add anything to them, they just work as is, so it's cool. So our first prep step is we're going to be crushing our opals. So I like to just combine these two opals together as I crush them. That way I can try and have a pretty even amount of each. So we're just gonna add a little bit of each of the opals and crush them nice and fine. I really wanted them to be in some extra small pieces. You could leave them a little larger if you'd like, but I liked the look of having some smaller pieces. Next, we'll crush the Obsidian. Like I said, this one adds a nice shimmer and kind of brilliance to your ring. So I just wanted to have a lot of smaller pieces. That way when you catch the light, you won't be able to see the obsidian necessarily, but you'll be able to see its shine when you catch the light with it. So it just adds a nice extra element to this ring. All right, now that we've finished prepping all of our materials, we're gonna get started with the ring. So when you add your ring blank to the mandrel, since it is black ceramic, remember to always use some sort of insulation. I always use electrical tape, but just something to protect your ring from the mandrel. They are surprisingly strong, but for whatever reason, the mandrel can just break them if you're not careful. So my first step is to do a thin layer of the obsidian black pigment. So like I said, since it is a non-glowing powder, it doesn't absorb into the CA quite as well. So what I did is I did a thin layer of the super thin CA adhesive, and then I just dumped a ton of the color pigment on top of that. The reason I used so much is just because since it has a harder time absorbing, I wanted to make sure that as much of it was on the ring as possible. That way I made sure I had an even coverage and every inch of the inlay blank was covered. All right, next up, we're gonna add a little bit more of our super thin CA adhesive just to wet the entire ring blank. And then we're gonna go through and add splashes of our neon orange and our neon red color pigments. I wanted to have a solar flare look, so I wanted to make sure that none of these splashes were too big or overpowering. So as you add it, just try and do your best to just add splashes. So just go slow, take your time, and splash away. Add just a nice look to it. One thing to note is that after you re-wet the entire ring with super thin CA adhesive, after you've added the splashes of your neon orange and red, is that it will darken considerably. Both of them, as they absorb some of that super thin adhesive, they will allow the black to show through a bit more. So feel free to try that a couple times to make sure you have enough of each of those colors, because you don't want it to be too dark, but also you don't want it to be too light. So just make sure you're checking to see if you have enough of both of those. All right, our next step is I just added a layer of medium CA adhesive around the entire ring, and then I added some of our crushed opal mix. I wanted it to be a little bit less opal heavy, so I just added a light sprinkle of our opals throughout the entire ring. Next up, we're gonna do the same thing, but with our obsidian. So I did another layer of the medium CA adhesive on top of the opals. And then I just kind of picked up some of the crushed obsidian and just kind of spread it out on top. I did this just to make sure that it was extra random, that there wasn't ever any heavy clumps of obsidian. I just wanted it to be spread out throughout the ring, but really randomly. And some areas got some larger pieces, some areas got some really small, like dust-like chunks of obsidian. So I think it'll add a cool look to the ring. Sometimes you'll have a really big piece that'll catch the light. Sometimes you'll have just little tiny specks that when they catch the light will just shimmer a little bit. So that's kind of what I was going for. After you've placed your obsidian and your opals in the ring, I used a little bit of accelerator to set them, just so that they won't move as we add our layers of super thin to fill in any gaps that are remaining. A few things to note as you do these layers of super thin. It's really easy to create air bubbles when you do this. If you're spinning the lathe too fast, if you use too much accelerator, if you have a lot of air in your bottle of CA. So those are a few things to look out for. Make sure you're not spinning the lathe too fast as you do this, and that before you add the CA, you kind of burp out any air bubbles that were in your glue tip. After we've finished filling up the ring with CA and everything is cured, we'll go ahead and Dremel it down flush. So I just use, I believe it's an 80 grit Dremel bit, and I just sand the entire thing down flush. After I've done that, I go through and I just double check that I don't have any air bubbles, or if I do, that I take the time to dig them out with a razor blade. This step could take a little bit of getting used to if you're not experienced with working with obsidian. You might mistake obsidian for an air bubble at this step. So better safe than sorry, just poke it with a razor blade to make sure it's something solid and not an air bubble. After we've cut out any air bubbles that we do have, I didn't notice any in mine, so I just went straight to this next step. I do another layer of super thin CA adhesive just to fill in any air bubbles or low spots and make sure that the ring has a really even top layer. After that, I went ahead and sanded our ring. So I sanded with 220, 500, 1000, and 1200 grit sandpapers. With an opal heavy ring like this, that's really all you need. You could go higher, up to like 3000 if you felt like you wanted it, but you will achieve a nice finish just going up to 1200. As always with sanding, I try and use a really wet sand. That way it cuts down on dust, but it also allows me to keep the ring nice and clean. I'm not sanding any of the bits back onto the ring. So just make sure you use water, wash it off every couple seconds to make sure that it stays nice and smooth. When you're done sanding, go ahead and polish your ring. For this one, I just used our step 2 polish and our step 3 Astrotech polish. I just felt like these two were enough for this ring. If I'm working with a harder material like meteorite or dinosaur bones or garnet or something like that, something a little bit harder to polish and sand, I will start with the rough polish and go through each step. So just keep that in mind. Depending on what you have in the ring, you'll want to change up your polishing process. For this ring though, I just started with our step 2 and then I finished it off with the mirror finish polish. All right, I'm really happy with how this ring turned out. I think it looks really nice. I really like the black background with no glow and then the splashes of the orange and the red. And then when it glows, it looks really cool because you catch the orange and the red glow powders and you can see a little bit of difference between those two. And then just the daytime itself looks really beautiful. I think it looks as much like a solar flare as we could make a ring look like. It has the nice oranges and some black, and yeah, I'm happy with how this one turned out. I hope you guys had as much fun making this one as I did. It's a cool ring. I'd love to see your renditions of this ring. Go ahead and tag us on Instagram or Facebook and share your ring design with us. So yeah, remember to like and subscribe and go join our Facebook Ring Maker group for tips and tricks and just to share and show off your different rings.